welcome.
Oh, thank
Thanks for
you.
taking the time to do this interview. So,
My,
obviously, I know you, but no one else knows you.
right.
So, tell us your name and a bit about yourself.
Oh, my name is Shane Jordan, and I'm a pilot. I was working 2 years in Alberta doing medical transfer flights. And after that, I was thankful enough to get a job at Air Canada. But then COVID happened. So right now I'm kind of on a pause, just waiting for the industry to pick back up. And
Yeah, it's interesting. COVID's affected everyone differently, especially the airline industry. But it's just a pause or a comma, and I'm sure everything will pick right back up where it left off. So I think it's good to use this downtime to reflect or even build on your skill set
yeah,
and catch up on sleep because I know you have a rigorous schedule at times. So
yeah, for sure.
it's unusual to come across someone that looks like you and me and
Mhm.
says that they're a pilot.
Right.
So, how exactly did you even start down that trajectory, and why is it that you wanted to do that?
Well, I think growing up as a kid, I traveled a lot and I always had a fascination with airplanes and airports. So when I was in high school, I really started to look into it and look into the different routes to get there, different school. So when I graduated high school, I decided to do a year of business just as like a backup plan, just in case the aviation thing didn't work out. Because every article I read always said you should have a backup plan,
Mhm.
just in case of situations like COVID that happens that are unexpected, and so you have something to do meanwhile.
Right.
So I did business for a year in Ottawa, and then after that, I enrolled in a 2-year aviation diploma program. So basically, that was in Moncton, New Brunswick, and it was a mixture of in-class stuff and in-flight stuff. So after 2 years, I got my commercial pilot's license, and I worked as a flight instructor for 6 months, teaching students how to fly on small airplanes. And after that, I got a job working for a company called CanWest Air in Alberta, which is doing medical transfers, transporting sick patients and all over the province. And followed by that is when I got my job at Air Canada.
Cool. And I'm sure that that was just a snapshot of everything that you've been through. And you said it so quickly, but I'm sure it felt like forever going down that journey. Now,
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
interesting that you mentioned that you kind of got introduced to this profession in school. And I don't know about everyone else, but when I was in school, I definitely didn't get an option of being a pilot.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Did you go to your school counselor, for example? They open a book and they say, select a potential career, or is it something that you previously had on your mind that they just walked you through the steps?
Well, I had it on my mind like since I was a kid. I just didn't really know how to get there, the best route to take. So I think when I was in grade 11, there was a kind of like a little seminar where all colleges came to our school and different speakers and just kind of getting a feel for what our options are. So I ended up talking to people that were telling me about the program and just telling me, you can go this way or this way and how long it'll take and the money I'll need for the program and stuff like that. So I always knew I wanted to be a pilot, but it was just knowing how to get there. I needed to figure out.
That's cool. But at least you had the opportunity to be in an environment where you were somewhat exposed to it, even through, like you said, a career counselor or being able to go to a seminar where you're able to hear, albeit loosely, what the broad steps are.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned that you kind of had a plan B, so you did go down the business or marketing route to get schooling there. So I know you're really stepping into your career, and congratulations for landing the Air Canada role. But if you were to think about doing things differently, is there anything that you would change in order to get to where you are quicker? Or is that even possible?
Definitely, I'd probably say I'd go into it right after high school instead of taking that year of business.
Okay.
I think I probably should have just went into aviation and then maybe did business down the road, like an online course on my downtime.
Yeah.
And maybe I would have done like a 1 year course instead of a 2 year course
Yeah.
because this can get done a lot quicker. I just wanted to do a diploma program where, I did classes in aviation within classes and other courses as well. So I got like the full diploma.
Yeah. And
So
that's interesting. You kind of took the
yeah,
scenic route, but you got there in the end.
yeah,
I didn't know it's something you can go to right after high school.
yeah. And even some people, they start training during high school. You can start to do flight training at the age of 16.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if I, wanted to get into it quicker, I could have started doing flying lessons in grade 12. But then again, I didn't think I was mature enough at that age to undergo that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. I don't want to glaze over the fact that you make it sound easy, first of all, but I know it's not easy by any means. But yes, you mentioned that there isn't a requirement to go to college or university to become a pilot, which boggles my mind, but great. It's still very technical. Mm-hmm. So what is sort of the challenge that you faced when learning about the technicality or the learning style that you had to adapt to during your training?
So you mean like while I was training?
Yeah. So I'm assuming it's quite different because you experienced at college.
Right.
I'm sure it's very different from the style that you learn in college. It's a bit of hands-on, but book as well. Can you walk us through what that looked like?
Like, you want to walk through what that looks like?
Yeah. So what was it like?
So basically, it was pretty much 5-6 days a week.
Yeah.
And you would have ground classes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes 7 days a week. So, you would have ground classes that lasted 4 hours. And then you do a flight in the afternoon. You'd have like a flight instructor. Mm-hmm. So you do like practice different maneuvers like turns or landings or anything like that. So usually those flights lasted about 2 hours. And then you'd go back and do more classes and then do one more flight in the evening. And then you usually finish your day around 7 or 8, come home and eat, give yourself like a mental break, and then usually review what you did during the day. Because a lot you take in at once, so you really have to, keep studying and to retain your knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. So it seems like very much not just you're learning through books or in class setting. It's very much you learn theory, then you get right into the plane, and it's straight away hands-on and a back and forth combination of the two.
Exactly, because the theory makes more sense once you're actually doing it.
It's the application that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So once you really apply it hands-on, then everything makes sense what you're learning in class. So it just kind of gets put together like a nice little puzzle piece.
Mm-hmm. And for any of our listeners that are thinking, oh, that's easy. I don't really need a college or university education. I can just go from high school, find a flight school and just get started. It is, like you mentioned, a rigorous process. So 6, sometimes 7-day process. So how did you kind of deal with that mentally? How did you manage to discipline yourself? Because I know at your young age, you have the allure of gambling, clubbing, and everything else. So how did you manage to discipline yourself to stay focused?
Well, I think for me, the first thing was going to school in New Brunswick. It was very isolated. I think if I did the program in Toronto, it'd be a whole different story with my friends here and more stuff to do. Mm-hmm. I was in an isolated city, and everyone in my school was all pilot, so everyone was on the same focus. Everyone had the same schedule, so no one was trying to distract anyone because we were all trying to get to our final goals. So yeah, just, good people around you to help you study, and I'll limit my social media. I know that's a big one for me that, tends to distract me. It's going on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat. So just knowing when I have an exam to turn off my phone or delete social media and kind of just lock on to studying, but also keeping a good sleep schedule and consistent. You don't want to have your sleep schedule all over the place because then you get tired and you should be studying. So just managing your sleep and your eat habits are a big one.
Now, that's a good point. So you mentioned 3 good things I just want to pull out so we don't skip over them. So you disciplined yourself enough to have a consistent routine. And I know sometimes that can be very difficult, but it's necessary. The discipline helps you to focus. You also mentioned that it was important to be around like-minded people, right? And that reminds me of the saying of show me your closest 5 friends and I will tell you who you are. So you have to be around people similar minded to you, focused on wanting to achieve something, then you can get there. And
people that are pull you up, not pull you down in a way.
Right. And then the last but very major thing, again, another thing you kind of glazed over, was that you completely changed your surroundings. Right. So if you're in Toronto, you probably would have seen a lot more distraction, but you went to almost the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
in order to get trained, and that kind of removed that distraction, removed that pool of negative energy, as it were, and allowed you to remain focused.
Right.
So
Sure.
I think that's another important thing to highlight in your journey. Again, the technical requirements of being able to get into flight school might not be that high, but in terms of the rigorous time and energy spent in trying to learn,
Yeah.
and also the sacrifice, because
Mhm.
I'm sure it wasn't easy going out to where you went.
Exactly. Leaving all your friends, and
Right. And
I always tell everyone,
how long were
like,
you away for?
I was away for 2.5 years,
2.5 years, right?
and I didn't really visit home much during that period. I had classes throughout the summer, and a
Yeah,
lot of holidays where my friends were home. I was staying and doing flights and stuff.
yeah,
I always tell people like anyone could be a pilot. It's just you can do anything you want. Like if it's an astronaut or a police officer, you just got to discipline yourself and put your mind to it.
right. And you definitely had disciplined yourself. You put your mind
Exactly.
to it, and you also went as far to, sacrifice. And that's a big theme here, to leave what you had at that time, go and pursue, and you even made your way back. Um,
Exactly.
and how common is that? So again, I'm not too familiar with the airline industry and training as such. Are there a lot of places in Toronto, the GTA, where you could learn or go to flight school, or do you have to travel in order to go down that career path?
I know there's a lot of schools in Toronto. I'd say the ones in Toronto are sometimes a little bit more costly and more competitive in a way. So it all depends on what you're looking for in a sense.
Hmm.
I just thought the school that I was going to was the best fit for me, but some people would be better fitted to stay in Toronto.
Yeah,
If you want to stay at home and commute,
Yeah.
to save that money, then that might be the better option for you.
yeah. But you're right. You took a wise decision to remove distraction, focus, and you got to
Hmm.
see Canada, right? So you've been to places that I've never ever heard of,
Yeah,
including Slave Lake.
yeah, exactly. Well, it helped me mature as well. Moving somewhere that you never thought you would live and being by yourself and
Yeah.
having to meet people, figure out how to get around and get used to a new environment. And,
Mhm.
places that are not as diverse as Toronto, of course. Just many different things you got to get used to
Mhm.
kind of make you a bigger person.
Yeah.
Than done.
Cool. And I mean, I've had the pleasure of being a passenger alongside you in a flight, and that was a really interesting, fun experience. You switched off the
Yeah,
engine, and I felt what it felt like. What was that? A rolling stool or something like that? It's called
that's all.
a
Yeah. So
stool.
basically,
Yeah.
when you're
So
kind of like falling out the sky in a way.
if anyone wants a mini heart attack, take Shane up on the offer to go for a flight. He'll switch off the engine on you. But what really blew my mind is the amount of information that is flying at you. So
Hmm.
I had on a headpiece, you had on a headpiece, and you had to both focus on obviously where you're flying. You had to
Right.
focus on all the different gauges, all the different monitors. You also
Right.
had to have an ear out or focus on the
Aircraft controllers.
traffic air control, and to let you know if there's another plane coming near you, and so with all that information coming at you, that's not, at least from my experience, a natural skill to be able to really focus on what you need to focus on and be able to switch focus, but at the same time make sure everything is in control. So
Yeah.
how did you build up that mental skill of focus in order to know how things are rolling at all times?
It's kind of hard to describe. I'd say like in the beginning when I first started training and I do my flights, my mind was like going 10,000 kilometers an hour.
Yeah,
There's too much going on, like you said, the buttons, applying the planes, the aircraft controllers. I found with anything, over time you kind of get used to it. But a big thing is that helps you with that is just not doing a flight if you have something going on in your life, like a big distraction.
right.
So you got to make sure that you sleep well, that there's nothing else bothering you. You know, no worries on your mind, not a lot of stress, and so when you're in the plane, you're just focused on that, and you're not thinking about a fight with your girlfriend or a fight with your mother, whatever the case.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you almost have to make sure you have a clear mind.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. So, question for you: the same way that someone would go to the gym and lift some weights to grow in muscle strength, is there anything that you practice either through routine or on a day-to-day basis to help you keep that mental clarity? I know that some people are into yoga, they're into meditation.
Yeah.
Anything you've adopted?
I think the biggest thing is YouTube. There's a lot of resources out there for being a pilot. A lot of, different pilots around the world that make videos of their flying experiences and, videos about aircraft engines or anything. So I spend a lot of my time on the internet, especially now on my downtime, just kind of watching videos, just keeping my mind in that aviation environment.
Awesome. Okay, so you just plug in and absorb the experience or knowledge of other people.
Exactly. I bought a lot of, DVDs over the years of, Air Canada pilots talking about their day-to-day experiences and, also manuals as well. I read a lot of books and just there's so much stuff you learn in flight school and it's hard to remember all of it.
Right.
So the best thing you can do is just keep current at it and just keep, reviewing it on your downtime.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting as well. So it's something that you have to upkeep in terms of regulation and different models and things like that, or?
Yeah, because there's stuff like no pilot knows everything. There's stuff you can learn every single day, which is something I love about the industry.
Yeah.
You learn from so many different guys, and you learn so many things different day that every single day that you never thought about.
Mm-hmm.
The learning kind of just never stops being a pilot.
Mm-hmm. So, in a way, and I pride myself in having my own mantra, and every day in every way, I'm getting better and better with some form of continuous improvement. So you mentioned that you're heavy on reading. Is there anything else that you kind of work into, whether it's not a daily routine, weekly or monthly routine, to make sure that you're continuously getting better and better at what you do?
I'd say right now the biggest thing is just reading because I don't have access to airplane right now, so I'm not doing any flying.
Mm-hmm.
So the most I could do is just watch a YouTube video or read a book or even call some of my friends from the industry and just have a chat with them and kind of talk about their experiences and share mine and
which is quite interesting. So even under this current environment of being under quote unquote lockdown or quarantine, you're still able to use resources at your disposal to make sure you're plugging into the source that you need to get more and more information and improve on what you're doing. So interesting. Okay, let's kind of shift the conversation a tiny bit. You mentioned that you do absorb a lot of information, whether it's through books, whether it's through YouTube. Is there a specific leader that you look up to? Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be within the aviation industry in general.
I'd say I couldn't just point out one leader, but to me, I'd probably say in the aviation industry, it's more just pilots that have been around the industry for a long time. Like watching, different YouTube videos. There's, different pilots that are, 60 years old and flying for 40 years that, always share their stories. So there's someone I really look up to because that's a point where I want to get to, where I've been at a company for 20 years and I have enough seniority to make my own schedule and fly best routes to China or Europe.
Interesting. And what exactly is it that you quote unquote look up to them for? Is it their discipline in the ability to continually to grow in their career, whether it's bigger aircrafts and take on greater responsibility, or is it the ability to stay within that same industry?
That's just a mixture of both. Staying with one company, but also flying different aircraft and being open to trying new things and also the teaching aspect, them being able to share their knowledge with the youth, with people like me, that's something I really, really appreciate.
Right. And I'm a huge proponent for that, if you didn't know already. That's precisely why we're doing videos like this, to grab as much valuable information as we can and share it with as many people as possible.
Exactly. I never met a pilot that was scared to tell information. Like most guys I talk to, they're always happy to pull you aside and give you some pointers or tips and advice. So really, I think that's maybe one of the best resources that someone can have is a role model or someone hired in the industry.
Right. And again, precisely why this mentorship series or program exists to provide access to those people that are able to give back. And if I was to give my 2 cents on that, I find you get the most value when you're able to give, right? In a lot of the mentoring situations or relationships that I've been part of, I learn just as much as a potential mentee by being able to share some of the learnings that I've got. It provides an opportunity to reflect and to even get better, and making sure that you're accountable to doing or practicing what you preach, as it were.
Yeah.
Awesome. So are there any resources? You mentioned YouTube, you mentioned books. Again, not necessarily specific to aviation, that have helped you along in your journey?
I'd say the main one is a book that I read in high school, and it's called So You Want to Become a Pilot.
Nice. Okay.
It's a 300-page book, and it basically outlines everything you need to know, the pros and cons. So not just the good things, all the glamorous things, but it's also the tough schedule, being away from home, what your family life is going to be like. And, so that was one of the biggest resources for me is, that really made me decide, that I really want to do this, seeing all the pros and all the cons as well.
And that's interesting you say that, because a lot of people, again, that I've spoken to helping them with their own career journey, they literally just fixate on the good.
Yeah.
They open up a book and or no book, these days it's a website. So they Google, how much does a doctor make? And then they really see the salary. They're like, great, sign me up. I just want to be a doctor because of how much money I make. So it was interesting that at such an early age, you not only looked at the pros, but you actually looked at the cons. So I can see how that would be a benefit. But before I give my opinion, how do you think that benefited your journey by understanding the two sides to the coin, as it were?
Well, it just kind of made me, make a decision early and find a good school, instead of getting into it and then realizing these cons and then, wasting your money. Before I even invested any money in it, I kind of wrote down the pros and the cons and, really thought about, is this the lifestyle I want? A lot of people just think, being a pilot is just getting in a big plane and flying from point A to point B.
Free flights, right?
Exactly. Free flights. Make good money, but there's a lot of stuff that could be hard on your body, hard on your family life and stuff like that. So.
And you were already mentally prepared for it.
Exactly. So I knew everything. And so even now when I'm in the career and stuff gets thrown at me, I know it's coming because I already read about it. So.
And I mean, mental preparedness is just one side of it. Did you, for example, prepare yourself financially? That helped you. And I know you said you took a year off to do college. Did that preparation in turn help you for your flight school journey and pilot journey?
Well, that year off kind of just got me really mature. I had a lot of time to think about my life, and I kind of matured as a person, which helped me get through the aviation program.
Right.
But also, like you said, that year off made me had time to plan my finances and do a breakdown of expenses, living expenses, food, flight expenses, all that cost. And that's one of the biggest reasons why people end up dropping out of the pilot program is because they don't plan their expenses early enough.
Right. Good. And that's like a little gem there. So if you're planning for or to join flight school, especially after seeing this, make sure you plan financially, but also make sure you look at both the pros and the cons. Make sure you have it balanced.
And there's lots of resources online that help you outline the cons.
Cool. Okay. I wouldn't say it's a bonus question, but it's a question that we ask all of our interviewees. Is there anything that I should have asked you, but I haven't?
I'm not sure. If you asked me what I like most about being a pilot.
There you go. You ask a question, now you answer it. What do you like most about being a pilot?
So for me, I like being a pilot is I find when I fly, it's very relaxing. You're in the sky and you have no service, so it's kind of disappear. All outside distractions. And a big thing for me as well is every day is different. you don't know what to expect, with weather, turbulence, or a different plane you're flying. You wake up, you go to work, and you don't really know how the day's going to go. It could go really good or really bad, very stressful. So I kind of like that challenge of not knowing how my day is going to be, and not knowing what's going to be thrown at me.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because you said that in order to be a successful pilot, first of all, you need to make sure that there's no distractions in your head. But at the same time, you said that the process of flying is itself calming.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of cool. You kind of prepare yourself to be calm, but at the same time, you get that calm back just in virtue of flying, which is cool. One thing I'm going to dig a bit deeper there. You mentioned you just don't know what sort of flight you're going to have, which is interesting. So sometimes it's a good flight, sometimes it's a bad flight. What's the worst sort of flight you've experienced?
I'd probably say Alberta, flying in the mountains in the middle of the night when it's a snowstorm.
Right.
It's happening very fast, and you have to be very quick on your thinking and reaction time.
So you have to be prepared for all sorts of weather conditions and scenarios, right?
Exactly. And every day, you're flying with someone different from my last job.
Right.
So you really have to get used to that person, but don't take a long time to get used to that person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't, okay, I'm flying with a new guy, and kind of just adapt on the spot.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for error in those situations, so
right.
You really have to try and gel with that person as quick as possible.
And that's an interesting side that you mentioned, actually, because I would assume that flight is just you're literally concentrating on making sure you don't crash a plane and there isn't so much interaction, but you have to make sure that you have good rapport with whoever you're flying with. I'm sure whether it's co-captain or if you're flying larger aircraft, the stewards and the staff on the plane as well. So you have to be quite personable. Interesting.
Yeah, good team coordination.
Yeah. And one other thing, as much as I know about flight school or preparation for becoming a pilot, they focus a lot on risk. So do you do a lot they did a lot of planning for different scenarios and what happens if this and what happens in that?
Yeah.
What was your experience of that? And a secondary question to that, have you found that perspective of looking at things infiltrate into other parts of your life?
Yes, I'd say exactly what you said. That's a big focus of flight training is emergencies, planning for engine failures or bad weather, or, just the unexpected stuff that doesn't always happen every day. So, in the beginning, it's kind of a little bit stressful to think about that. You don't really want to be practicing engine failures all the time, but that's something that kills a lot of pilots. So it's something that, you want to be very proficient at and comfortable with. So if it does happen, you know how to prepare. And what was the second part of your question, sir?
So with that training of, preparing for worst case scenarios and looking for different types of risk, have you found that not just be a big pillar of being a pilot or flying, have you found that way of thinking infiltrate into other areas of your life? So I don't know whether you're driving or if you're walking down the street, are you potentially looking for risk around the corner?
Yeah. I'd say just, it could be driving or life in general, but, life is unexpected and anything could happen.
Right.
So that's how it helps me, is just knowing that, you want something to go perfect, but there's always, a question mark could happen, some bump, but nothing's picture perfect all the time. So for me, it's just kind of that model, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, type of scenario.
Yeah.
Let's have a backup plan.
And you've always struck me as a level-headed young man. So you're laid back, so you're not one to go crazy if something does go wrong. So that's interesting. So would you say you have to have a certain type of personality to do well as a pilot, or is it open to anyone and they can kind of learn how to deal with things?
I'd say not be super laid back, but you can't be too panicky, because in a situation where you have an engine failure, you don't want to be overreacting and not thinking straight. So you always have to be very calm, and it just goes back to training. If you train very well and you study all your procedures, and something like that happens, you already have that practice, and you're not going to panic because that's something you've been practicing and studying for
Right.
the last few years. So it's just a matter of applying it.
Yeah.
You know.
So an underlying theme there is make sure you're prepared.
Exactly. Prepare. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like I was a flight instructor, and I told all my students the biggest thing: be prepared. Like don't, because flight training is a lot of money, so don't come into a flight if you're not prepared or you didn't sleep. You know.
Right.
Make sure you had a good rest. You know, you studied your books the night before, and you know you come in with that focused mindset.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Last question for you. This is what we call our leadership question. What does being a visionary mean to you?
A visionary, I'd say someone that kind of imagines how imagines life and how they want their life to go. Has a big imagination, big dreams, and always, you know, always trying to just planning in their head and always having a plan and always researching and not just wanting something to happen, but you know, planning for it to happen. And, you know.
I like that. So it's not just letting your imagination run wild and then catching yourself and thinking, "Oh, that's a cool idea," but being purposeful in planning or designing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Proactive. I mean,
being proactive. I like that.
Yeah.
On that note, thanks very much, Shane, for spending the time to talk to us about your career and your experiences. Some really valuable takeaways in this interview, and I'm sure the audience is going to love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.